It's no longer a trade war, it's economic trench warfare. And nobody's winning, except maybe Mexico. On one side, you've got Trump cranking tariffs right back up, trying to strong-arm China into trade concessions. On the other hand, Beijing isn't just firing back with tariffs of their own, they're invoking Chairman Mao and calling this a protracted struggle. When trade negotiations start sounding like a Maoist revolution, it's safe to say that we've left the negotiating table and entered the battlefield. This is a 2025 version of the US-China trade war, but it's not round one. We've seen this movie before. In 2018, Trump launched the first volley of tariffs, triggered a tit-for-tat with China that lasted for years. That fight ended in a truce called the Phase 1 Agreement in 2020. China agreed to buy more US goods, Trump declared victory, everyone moved on, pretending like nothing ever happened. But, it's like all shaky truces, it just didn't hold. Fast forward to 2025 and Trump's back in the White House. First 100 days, dust off the tariff playbook. He slapped new levies on $125 billion worth of Chinese imports. Everything from electric scooters and solar panels to raw materials and machine parts. It's a shot straight at China's manufacturing base. And this time, the rhetoric is even sharper. Trump says that he's fighting to bring jobs back, protect American industry, and stop the Communist Party from cheating us blind, whatever that means. China's response? Classic counterpunch. They hit back with their own round of tariffs targeting American goods. And they added a layer of theater. Their state media ran op-eds quoting Chairman Mao. Officials started referring to this as a prolonged war. One Chinese diplomat even said, "We will eat bitterness if we must." Our resolve is steel. Translation? Don't expect them to fold anytime soon. And this time, they're not fighting alone. China's been quietly working with the diplomatic circuit. They've reached out to the UK for support, they've pitched Latin America on deeper trade deals, and they've even leaned on the European Union to stay neutral. There's even talks of tighter cooperation with the BRICS nations. They're framing this as a battle, not just against America, but against what they call economic bullying, which is ironic given how China treats its own trade partners, but I digress. In international politics, consistency is optional. What's not optional is the impact on you and me. Tariffs sound abstract, but they hit hard in the real world. Here's how it works. When the US slaps a tariff on Chinese goods, it's basically a tax. Importers either eat that cost, which almost never happens, or they pass it on to consumers, raising the price of the goods. And that's you. So prices go up, not across the board, but in very specific areas. Electronics, furniture, auto parts, solar panels are among the first to feel it. Retailers are already warning of summer price hikes. Supply chains are scrambling again, and small businesses who rely on Chinese parts, they're reworking entire operations. And then there's the farm economy. Every time the US and China trade punches, American farmers get caught in the crossfire. China is dialing back on purchases of US soybeans and pork. Midwest producers who thought that trade tensions were behind them are now bracing for round two, or maybe round three, depending on how you're counting. Meanwhile, the stock market has the jitters. It's going all over the place. The moment Trump announced tariffs, major indices dipped. Not a crash yet, but volatility is creeping back in. Investors hate uncertainty, and this trade war is nothing if not unpredictable. Tech stocks are especially exposed, given how much they rely on Chinese manufacturing and rare earth metals. So, what's the plan from here? According to Trump's team, this is a strategic reset. They claim that the short-term pain will bring long-term gain, that China will eventually be forced to the table and agree to fairer terms. The administration says that this is about sovereignty, not economics, about standing up to a regime that's been exploiting global trade rules for decades. But here's the problem. China's not playing by the old rules anymore. They're just not reacting. They're adapting. Instead of folding, they're accelerating efforts to become self-sufficient, investing in domestic semiconductor production, building their own internal consumer markets. They're tightening economic ties with countries that won't follow the US's every lead. They call it dual circulation, a plan to insulate their economy from foreign shocks. And ironically, US tariffs might be helping them get there even faster. But here's the catch. China's economy is already under serious strain. Youth unemployment is sky high. So high, in fact, that Beijing stopped publishing the numbers last year. They're not even going to tell us what their unemployment rates are. The real estate sector, which was once a pillar of the Chinese economy, is unraveling under the weight of debt and developer defaults. She can't afford to look weak. If China caves to US pressure now, it sends the wrong signal to an already uneasy public. And that's why it isn't just economic, it's existential. And the US, it's just as political. Tariffs aren't just a trade lever, they're a campaign tool. Trump is using them to rally Rust Belt voters, claiming he's taking the fight directly to Beijing. But it's not just Trump. Even Democrats have grown even more hawkish on China. In today's Washington, being tough on China is one of the last bipartisan positions left. And that means that this fight is likely to continue, no matter who's in office, red or blue. Despite all the talk of decoupling, the reality is much messier. American firms still rely heavily on Chinese labor, parts, rare earth minerals. China's manufacturers still need access to the US buyers and capital. Untangling that web is far more complicated than the headlines might suggest. So, while both governments might talk about cutting ties, the private sector is stuck in the middle, trying to navigate sanctions, tariffs, and political uncertainty while still making payroll. So who's benefiting from all this? Believe it or not, Mexico. As companies try to reduce their exposure to China, many are relocating manufacturing to Mexico. It's close, it's cheap, and it's not being tariffed into oblivion. Nearshoring is the hot new buzzword. Ford, GE, and even smaller suppliers are rethinking their supply chains. If this is a divorce between the US and China, Mexico is the rebound in the relationship. Europe's trying to stay out of it. The UK is in diplomatic limbo, torn between trade ties with China and security alignment with the US. The EU is hesitant to take sides, but Brussels is watching nervously. A fragmented global trade order isn't good for anyone, and there's growing concern that this conflict could morph into a Cold War 2.0 with economic zones instead of nuclear arsenals. The risk of recession is very real. A prolonged trade war can slow growth, reduce investment, and feed inflation. The Fed has been walking a tightrope, trying to balance interest rates and economic growth. A spike in tariffs throws a wrench into that balancing act. Add in rising energy costs, geopolitical tensions, and shaky consumer confidence, and you've got the recipe for stagflation. There's also the wild card of tech. The US has already restricted advanced chips exported to China. China, in turn, is threatening to cut off rare earth exports. And this isn't just a trade fight, it's a tech arms race. And if that accelerates, it could hit everything from your iPhone to your car to military defense systems, missile defense systems. But there's a darker risk here, one that's rarely discussed out loud. Economic conflict doesn't always stay economic. History gives us a chilling example. In the lead up to World War II, the US placed embargoes on Japan, cutting off critical exports like oil and rubber. Japan, feeling cornered and economically strangled, responded with a military strike. Pearl Harbor wasn't just about ideology. It was about access to resources and trade routes. Now, the US and China aren't anywhere near close to that with that level of tension, hopefully, but the mechanisms are eerily familiar. You got two superpowers locked into escalating economic fight, and neither are willing to back down. Both are convinced that the other one is the aggressor. You've got weaponized trade, tit-for-tat sanctions, and rising nationalism on both sides. And that's how things go from economic hostility to strategic miscalculation. And the South China Sea is already a pressure cooker. China continues to militarize the region. The US continues freedom of navigation operations. Add an economic Cold War on top of all that, and the risk of an actual Cold War, or even worse, just a regular war, really starts to creep in. A stray drone, a misinterpreted maneuver, a blockade here or there, and suddenly the headlines stop being about tariffs and start being about troop movements and ships setting sail. Nobody's forecasting an imminent war, but the longer this conflict drags on without a resolution, the more dangerous the edges become. The goal of trade is supposed to be peace through prosperity. When trade becomes a weapon, peace starts to feel optional. So what can you do about all this? First, brace for higher prices on imported goods. If you're buying tech, tools, or furniture, expect to pay more, maybe buy it now. Second, if you're an investor, think about where your exposure is. Companies heavily reliant on Chinese supply chains might face rocky earnings. Third, if you run a business, start diversifying now or yesterday. The era of cheap, stable China-sourced goods is fading fast. And fourth, remember that this isn't just a spat between two countries. It's a structural shift. The global economy is realigning. Old trade alliances are being redefined. And while politicians argue over tariffs, the real story is that globalization, as we knew it, is being completely rewritten. And this isn't about who wins. It's about who adapts fastest. Now let me know down in the comments below. Do you think we'll resolve this and get an easy win, or do you think things are going to continue to escalate into oblivion? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe for the YouTube algorithm, and I'll see you next time.